recording, so we have it. Demon Case, good to see you. Yeah, it's been a long time since I had a predictable schedule, and this is probably good for people on the other side of the world. This is at 3 p.m. in New York, lunchtime, noon in California. Andre, S22, good to see everyone. So yeah, basically I was looking at these different particle renderings that I think were used as like Samsung Note or Galaxy, one of the Samsung's wallpaper or like marketing materials. So it's just pretty cool how it like has some fluid properties, like you can tell there's maybe a pressure solver or something. Maybe it's just curl noise, but I wanted to try it. This one especially looks like a side of a splash, or some kind of, these tendrils look very much like a flip simulation or something like that. VFX Charles, how's it going? And this stuff like ripping off looks pretty similar. So I was playing around with a flip narrowband simulation, kind of like a washing machine or something we have here. But yeah, I wasn't really intending for it to be in motion, or maybe you could retime it and play it really slowly or something like that to have a little bit of motion. But I basically just set up, you can get back into the scene view here. So I set up a little flip simulation, very basic structure here using the wave tank. Just turn off the solvers down there so it doesn't slow anything down. So yeah, it's basically this wind force, the pop axis force, that's this red visualization that you have down here, and a pop drag. I feel like the pop drag, if you're doing more abstract flip stuff, it will kind of help reduce splashiness, or like kind of helps the surface. I did do surface tension in here, and I feel like the drag will help keep stuff kind of clumped. I don't know, it's more of like an anti-gravity type of look or effect or whatever. So depending on what you're trying to do, it can be nice. What player is this? It's RV. I haven't learned the shortcuts or whatever for Mr. Viewer or DJV or any of that stuff. I know all the stuff here that's like flip, flop, retiming, doing render layers and stuff. I know that Autodesk announced some plans to open source parts of RV. It seemed like people were doing some bad reporting on it and reported it as like Autodesk did a bad press announcement or something, because apparently they kind of clarified their statement and they aren't planning to release the full build as an open source, like downloadable. But hopefully, I don't know if more portions of this will become freely available. But yeah, as of now, it's like tied to a subscription model with ShotGrid that Autodesk bought it or whatever. But to me, this is always my favorite player. A lot of studios use it as well because you can set like segments pretty quickly. You can do this annotation stuff that's pretty cool if you want to make little notes or whatever, if you're like an art director or the supervisor. You can make little drawings and give people notes, and then they'll stay around for that frame. So if you want to keep almost doing frame by frame drawing or whatever, you can do that. Yeah, Autodesk bought Shotgun, and they bought RV as well. They're buying everything. It's RV. The name of the player is RV. So yeah, if you look it up, you can find RV. Yeah, it's a part of a subscription with ShotGrid or whatever. I mean, I'm hoping they do some more things to open source it, but as of right now, it's not a completely free thing or whatever. On my resources page, on the kind of wiki thing here, yeah, a lot of people have DNEG. A lot of studios have pretty good setups that, I don't know, like so much of this stuff isn't, there's not really a good commercial player that will like let you frame by frame set segments, reverse, like retime, like all that quickly. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, I do have this tools section here, and I think Mr. Viewer, this might be somewhat reasonable alternative. But yeah, I never took the time to go through and relearn shortcuts or anything like that for this, but it would be nice if there's a free open source alternative or whatever to RV. I think this looks somewhat close. But yeah. Michael Yang, good to see you. Yeah, I'm hoping we can get more people stopping in now that the schedule is somewhat regular and not just spur of the moment or spur of the every 3 months. But yeah, so planning to get into some particles, some stuff kind of like this. And yeah, I was just going through the flip simulation, and we got, where did it go? Did I close it? We got a little sidetracked, but yeah, I basically use this with all my flip books. I have the information stuff come up as well, so it will keep track of some metadata, like the Houdini scene file gets embedded in like the headers of the MP4. So it's just a workflow that I've been doing for quite some time that I find pretty useful. So yeah, this is a flipbook of it. I cashed out a, yeah, I mean, RV and redshift are kind of different. RV is just the viewer. It's just to play image files or whatever. So you could use it with redshift. I know redshift calls it like the render view, or its abbreviation is RV, so it's a little confusing or redundant. But yeah, this is basically just for playing movies or looking at pictures. So there's that, and then there's pure ref that's just like for artboards, and this one you can get for free if you go to their website. But yeah, those are two really useful applications for, I don't know, working visually or creatively, that I wish like more, they were more standard, or more the Linux or computers just came with them or whatever. So yeah, the flip simulation stuff is pretty basic. I just went through it there with the video, and then I cached it out here. So I didn't want to spend a bunch of time today playing around with a simulation and settings and stuff like that. So I'm just going to read in the cache that I wrote out earlier, and we'll work with that. I just put it in the my temp directory here, and each frame took maybe a minute or so. So it's not super heavy, but it is a pretty high particle count. Maybe like 28, almost 30 million particles, but with the narrow band stuff, it's more optimized. And then the Houdini flip solver has been getting more efficient or optimized through the various releases and stuff like that. So I'm just going to go into my geometry view and switch this point size down to 3. And then if you switch this to pixels, sometimes that's a little bit nicer to look at. The points view, I don't know, for whatever reason, it will try to do some shading, or like it just turns into static or whatever. So with the flipbook, all of this, I was using the pixels view, and then it just gives you like a cleaner, smoother look. And you could do some anti-aliasing if will kind of just help smear stuff together. And I was just going to try to find an interesting area of this simulation that kind of reminded me of some of these frames. So that's where we'll get started here in terms of the 3D scene file and all of that. If you guys want to grab this work and kind of start where I am, you can get a copy of that scene file in the chat here in a second. And you could cache it out. By default, it's just set to my temporary or whatever your temporary /tmp, or on Windows, it's like c:temp or something. But you could start caching that out and you should have something that looks similar to me, but it might take 20 or 30 minutes or something to get to a late enough frame in the simulation. But yeah, so you look through this and just see what's happening. It's somewhat interesting. Another thing that you can do if this view is like just too flat or too basic to look at, if you do this VDB, or I think it's just actually this rasterize attributes. We could maybe do this the other way as well. Rasterize particles. I think this is the one. They have so many of them that... Okay, so I think it's this rasterize particles. Do you do your work in rendering in Houdini, or do you hop over to other programs to finalize things, or do look dev? It depends. With Redshift, or doing stills and where did it go? This kind of stuff. I like to just stay in Houdini, and like then you can do your post effects with Redshift, and even do the color curves and color correction and stuff that you would typically do in compositing or in Photoshop, and you can just relight, like do color curves all at once, and I find it a really efficient way of working. For animations and stuff like that, I'm using Nuke a little bit. I sometimes just use it as a viewer or whatever, but for doing grades or this kind of stuff, it's pretty nice. Sometimes I'll use this even after Redshift output with like the post effects baked in, just to do some subtle moves, or you can play around with a little bit different gamma, or just, I mean, you don't really want to do too much color correction on top of the work you did in Redshift, especially if you're like baking out LUTs and stuff like that. But I'll use Nuke for that kind of stuff, and then sometimes Premiere or the Avid, what was the one that they did? I forget the name of it, but they released one that was free, that's DaVinci, I think, that you can download non-commercially or whatever, and you can do video editing, or you can do some color correction. I think they have some node-based stuff, so that's pretty much my options for post. Sometimes I do Photoshop, sometimes I do some simple cropping and just like coloring stuff in there, but it's not the funnest application to use, just because it's like Adobe and doesn't handle color correction or EXR, like color spaces or EXR, or that kind of alpha channels and that stuff the best. So just for efficiency, I try to do everything in Houdini, like even a background gradient like this, I would probably just put it in the actual scene, so that you're visualizing the one-to-one output, and you're not trying to like extrapolate how things will look in your head, and then you try, I don't know, something that looks different. Yeah, Nuke can be expensive. They have some non-commercial versions as well for that. You might be limited to like 1920 by 1080 res, but overall it's pretty good enough for what you're doing, as long as you're just working on like reels or you're going to show work on YouTube or something like that. But it's pretty good. Jeremy Kamal, thank you for gifting a tier 1 to extra nodes. I appreciate it. And yeah, the subs and gifting and all that stuff, if you do have a subscription, you will get access to the bonus section of the Discord, where this is extra content, or it's basically a mirror of the stuff that I have on my Patreon channel or Patreon profile. So yeah, if you have a sub, or if you get gifted a sub, or if you have a Amazon Prime account, you can use that to subscribe to me for free, just like Husker0117 did. And that way, money gets taken out of Jeff Bezos's bank account and goes into my pocket. So I appreciate it. So we'll do a VDB here to basically initialize our volume grid. You can call it density. Mosui, it's good to see you. Sorry I missed you. So this will just start your volume grid. And when I wrote out these particles, I put p-scale as a detail attribute. So it basically just makes the caching size smaller. But if we want this node to see the p-scale, we can just promote it back from detail to point. But basically, because this p-scale value isn't changing per particle when you do it with a flip simulation, if you store it as a detail attribute, it doesn't keep getting like propagated to all the points, and your cache size will be a little bit smaller. But then here for this node, we want to make sure that the particle scale will get like pulled in from that attribute. The beautiful UI of Mint, it's okay. I don't know. Some of the stuff I'm not a big fan of, like the file browser interface and some of that stuff. But yeah, overall, I mean, I just like somewhat minimal, classic desktop AIs, especially with like 3D graphics and stuff like that. The last thing you want is all this stuff bouncing around, and like the new Ubuntu, just a lot of people are adopting this like iPad style or tablet style user interface or stuff like that. That's not as, it's just too distracting for me with like 3D applications. So I'm just converting all of these particles to VDB. This might have been a little too much detail. But basically doing this kind of stuff, even if you're not going to render it as a volume, you can get useful information from it. I think in that stream, one of the foundation streams, I talked a little bit about this, where you can kind of use this to pull extra information or add extra information to your simulation. So just even doing this attribute from volume. Maybe I didn't type it in right. They're adding too many nodes to the menu. Attribute from volume. So basically you put in geometry in this first input, and then your volume you want to grab information from in the other output. And by default here, this is just going to take the raw density value for each voxel and apply it to the particles that belong to our inside of that voxel. So if you want to multiply down the density, you can do that through coverage scale or some stuff like that. Or if you do volume mix here, this is basically just a simple way to multiply your volume. So it's kind of like the grade node in Nuke or anything like that that you can just apply. I'm just going to multiply the values down by 0.05. So it's just kind of like an exposure or changing the image resolution or whatever. But you can see this way we're able to get just some more visual details. I don't know, maybe similar to like ambient occlusion, but it's just the spatial density of things. And you can also do the volume smooth operation if you want to blur this field. So you can kind of smooth that and it will look a little bit cleaner or whatever. But yeah, you can start to see more of the shape of the simulation. So even without lighting, but just putting that stuff there is definitely helpful than just having a constant color applied throughout. So working in 3D space compositionally, that's going to help you just put a camera in and frame stuff instead of waiting for a render to kick in each time and see where the light's happening. That's like a lot of ray tracing or a lot of math that is slow to calculate. So if you can at least get a little bit better of a visualization in 3D or in the viewport, you'll be in better shape. So I don't know here, maybe this this area is pretty interesting. This stuff here seems to have a nice silhouette. Another thing that I'll do sometimes is just start using time shifts. So this stuff is a sequence, or it's like a range of frames. So if you just put one down and delete the expression, that's almost like a placeholder or like a bookmark. So maybe if I'm working up here and want to scrub around and try to find a different frame, I can still just always go back and know that this will be locked to that previous frame. So you could even try out different frames and you don't have to always worry about losing your place in the simulation or whatever. RB Kiramov, how's it going? Happy Friday. And I think at this point too, you might even want to start thinking about putting in cameras. If you press the D key over the viewport and go to camera here, you can change the default perspective. I tend to like I guess more narrow field of view, like a longer lens that's almost more like telephoto and can flatten out kind of 3D space a little bit better. I think that can help give you nice compositions, but at the same time, it depends what you're doing. If it's super abstract like this, you can go with a really wide field of view, almost like a fisheye. And you might be able to get cool, more like abstract shots or things happening like that. If we look at these images here, I would say a lot of them are a longer lens. Just spatially, stuff doesn't look that like warped or distorted. So it looks more like a telephoto lens, or like someone's shooting like wildlife or like sports or something like that. It might be not that telephoto, closer to like a portrait lens or just a standard lens or something like that. Ali Meow, how's it going? So that's just some of the things that are going through my head as I start setting stuff up with this composition or framing. So just starting with the camera aspects of stuff. And then if you want to start saving specific views, you can just hold down Control and click on the camera. I have mine defaulting to this kind of anamorphic widescreen aspect or whatever. But if you want to try out different kind of resolutions or aspect ratios, you can have fun with that. You want to ask a semi-private question in a public Twitch chat? What are you cooking up here? So we could try that camera. I don't know if something over here looks pretty cool as well. It kind of just depends how you work. Some people might just start with one camera view and then just put down lights and just kind of bang on straight away with that, but depends. Just sometimes if you're feeling compositionally creative, it's cool just to bang out a bunch of different views, and then you can work more like in stages. You could do the compositions first and then the lighting and stuff like that second or whatever. How is the work-life balance? How much are you working most of the time? Yeah, I don't know how much I want to get into the personal stuff, but I mean, just in general, work-life balance is pretty important. I think is Houdini single right now? I think yeah, I don't know. Everyone I know in visual effects or advertising or design kind of struggles with it, just because I mean, it is a somewhat fun job, and like the clients give you crazy deadlines, so it's easy to spend a lot of time on it. But currently, it's a pretty good balance, I would say. Definitely, some movies that I worked on were the worst, where like crunch time would happen and clients would be asking for crazy changes and stuff like that, and you because the movie timeline is so long, you could end up 2 or 3 months just in a final push for like doing a Super Bowl trailer, and then the final release or all these new edits, and they're kind of just in constant crunch. I know Marvel has had some issues with that, and I think a lot of people, a lot of studios are trying to be more conscious of things like that. If you look at this DNEG website, oh, what's going on here? Never a statement you want to you want to see on. Never something you want to ask the lawyers to have to draft for you doing a quarterly earnings report to the investors. But yeah, it's generally an issue across the board, I would say, at most studios or stuff like that. So if you can find a team and company and everything like that is conscious about it and aware or mindful, it's good. So yeah, we'll do one more angle here. I don't know. Some of the stuff just on the side could be cool. Maybe still leave kind of a arc, like some negative space or whatever. But yeah, we have 3 different views now. We can just start to pop around and try stuff out. I'll just save this as a new version. Yeah, DNEG is getting some criticism. It seems like Marvel in general, like every shop that they farm stuff out at, they're just, I think Marvel at the higher level that's contracting stuff out to all these other vendors later on down the chain, they're just like leaning on people too hard, or I don't know, I guess that there was the Hulk, the female Hulk, that the skin was too smooth, or that people wanted to see more pores in the skin, or there was like this Sonic feature movie, and they didn't like the creature design in the trailer, like enough of the fans didn't like it, so they redid it. But I think overall there's just I don't know, like not enough, the director or people high enough on aren't like making good enough decisions or sticking with them enough, like sticking by them. So that's might be where some of the issues start. I don't know. All right, if we go into the out, just do the redshift nodes. And I'm gonna just start using redshift here. We might explore or try other renders later on, but just for speed and trying to get stuff done on stream, I might do that. And I think we should be good. The only gotcha is like this node, I didn't create it when I had the redshift plugin activated, so you don't see the redshift render properties. But if you just go to the redshift drop down here, where you can also get it from the shelf menu here, you can do object parms, and then that will add the extra parameters for redshift control. And then we're going to want to render this as particles, and it will use the p-scale. So by default, I'll just leave this at 1, and we can control it there. I'm just going to do the render view. Huena Poison. Is that how you say it? How's it going? So I think it's just spinning up right now, and it might be a little heavy for the GPU because it's like a lot of particles to transfer from your scene to the GPU. Sometimes in the past, I've set up a volume to crop things that are too far outside of the camera frustum, and that can speed this process up a little bit. So we might look into doing that if this takes too long. We'll also hope that this doesn't kill my OBS too much. I know that sometimes this running the GPU stuff can put me into 4 FPS mode, so that might be an issue as well. So yeah, I'll just optimize this quickly before we move forward. I'm gonna go into my redshift plugin options, and I'll just only use one GPU for right now. Maybe just that 3080. And I think that's okay. But I'm also just going to build in this volume thing. So that we want to crop to the current camera. And maybe if we just keep the redshift camera here, copy that parameter, and then if we make a volume node here, we can set this up to make a volume from the camera. And I'm just going to reference the, maybe it's better to do like the absolute path in this case. So just basically this will grab whatever camera we set down here. And this will kind of be a global place, because I don't know if there's a way to, there might be a way with Python or something to programmatically grab your viewing camera, but for right now it's too much to set that up. So if you just do 1 here for density, that will fill it up. And this is basically your camera window. So we can extend this maybe to be 15. If we just like template this, you could get an idea here of what we're doing. So the bounds of this don't matter too much. Just big enough to fill stuff, and the resolution isn't that important. So just something like this should be good. The thing I do usually add is like a little bit of padding. So basically you don't have any light leaking into the particles. Like you have some extra margins that can help. You just don't see artifacts at the edges of the screen. Otherwise, if you crop right at the area, usually the light will kind of bleed in and you'll see light, like just lines where things will be a little bit brighter at the edges of the screen. So we have, oops, forgot to do it the other way. All right, so we have that. Any advice on getting into Python? Are there any unsung Houdini resources? Teachers, I don't know. There's some that are kind of hiding online. There used to be some super good veterans on OddForce. I was actually doing some stuff on OddForce today, but I haven't seen them on there in a while. But yeah, there's some pretty good names on OddForce that are definitely super helpful. But yeah, just going through here, this is a pretty good archive just to check out or search around or whatever. I know some of these young people in the chat that aren't boomers probably don't even know what a web forum is, but this is basically where I was going for resources in Houdini early on. I think now a lot of that stuff's moved to Discord or like Twitter or other social media stuff or whatever, but there's still people on there active somewhat. And then with Python, I don't know if there's super good advice. I would say just to search around online and try, yeah, I mean, you can ask people on OddForce for help if you're getting into Python, but the biggest thing I would say is just figuring out what you want to do and then try to do it. Like if you sit down and just say, I'm going to learn Python for Houdini, it's like too intimidating or too intense. The way that I learned it was actually through like the documentation, or they have some small sections there for getting started, I guess. I don't know how useful it is or relevant or whatever, but I think if you go here and maybe cookbook, they have some small examples where they're trying to kind of show you what they're doing. Just doing some basic stuff like this is pretty cool. You can even do it in your command line. Most shells or like computer system, like Linux or Windows, you can just type in Python 3 and you'll get it. You can use it as like a calculator. So if you just do that, you'll get basic operations. So even if you just need quick access to a calculator, you get a handle of doing it this way. You can do like basic stuff and like store variables and just make little things. So that's pretty cool. But yeah. All right, so we have this volume with just a value of 1 that's inside of the camera frame. So if we use this group node and just set it to points, the bounding region, actually you can do bounding volume. And then this ISO surface is basically like a threshold value. So depending on if it's above or below that threshold, it will group the particles. So we're basically grouping external particles. I think if we did like something above 1, we would get all of them. But if we just do some value below 1, it should start to get stuff that's just outside of those edges. So we can do that, and then we can just do a blast node, and we can get that group from the dropdown. It's just had the cache or read the cache or whatever. So we can delete that as well as the unused groups. And now we've gone from like 38, or what was it, 38? 37 to 16 million particles, but that will, you probably want to do this maybe after the hold frame. But that will help you render stuff with redshift more quickly, or just preview stuff, because you're ignoring all the stuff that's out of the view that can save you time. And I don't know, I think maybe this near plane, I want to set this to be a smaller value just in case I end up working closely, moving a camera closer in. But for right now, I was okay, but just, you might as well set this to a bigger range than you need or whatever. So that's good. And then when I was rendering the stuff, it did look like my scale was a little too small, so, or too big. So I just do 10% of the scale. So we'll put it back in here, another render. Should be quicker, and hopefully the webcam doesn't stutter as much. I think it looks a little, should just be using one of the GPUs now. So that's looking a little better. I'm just starting with an environment light, or the RS dome light or whatever here. You can even start to put in some of the backdrop if you want. Kind of like they're doing in these references, they just have some subtle tint or hue or something like that. So we'll just do a little warmth or vibrance or something like that. And that should be cool to start like that. And usually I just move stuff around, floating windows or whatever. I like a flexible workspace. I'm just gonna lock this hopefully to the camera. I don't know, it should automatically get it based off of this render rough, but sometimes it doesn't. Learn Houdini for a beginner with a limited budget. So the software itself is free, and then it's just a matter of getting like a computer that is good to run it. I don't know if that's your barrier to entry, or if it's more of just like acquiring learning resources or that kind of stuff. But I think there's a good amount of free or cheap learning resources. If you, especially just the side effects YouTube channel, like they do a good job of showcasing the different talks and classes and stuff like that that they host. Yeah, but the apprentice version, so they have a completely free one. I think that's the apprentice one that it might put a watermark on your stuff, but for getting started, it's definitely amazing. Like I remember learning Houdini maybe 11 or something like that. But it was before Nuke had a non-commercial version. It was before Maya and Autodesk were doing their student versions, and it was super good resource. For projects, I think it just depends what you're most interested in, or just try stuff out. I would say definitely just to start with a easier task. Don't get too over ambitious, I would say. Like it's easy to get to kind of bite off more than you can chew with Houdini and get frustrated or overwhelmed or anything like that. So I would say just to start very simple. Sometimes giving yourself kind of creative constraints is super helpful when you're learning stuff. Like if you just say, I'm just going to make still images and not worried about animation at the start, or just things with one color, or just stuff like that. I don't know, I mean, depending, what you want to do. If you have stuff in mind, that's fun, but you can also just try to recreate stuff that you've seen other people make that you like online on Instagram or Twitter or whatever. I wouldn't say it's a good idea to like show that or submit that, but sometimes if you're just learning or getting started, you need to just do like try to replicate what someone else did to learn. Like a lot of painters would do that kind of stuff. Sometimes musicians or composers will do that, where they'll have another song in the timeline and they'll try to write like an accompanying piece or track or instrument to it, and then depending on that you can even take away everything else and then you kind of have your own little riff or instrument or whatever. All right, so what have we got here? My color values are not updating. I think I had the wrong light selected there. So yeah, sometimes you can get the complementary color. Like if we're starting off somewhat warm or whatever, sometimes you can go the opposite side of the color wheel, but it's not looking too good. And I also think that most of these are like very monochromatic or whatever. So I don't think it's going to be that good of an idea to put in other colors, ones that are super different. You can do maybe something that's like a little bit shifted or different, but overall I think it's like that. And then I think on the background like this, doing a backlight or rim light isn't super successful. It kind of just makes it look like you have some alpha, what is it called? Pre-multiply issue. Sometimes if you put an image over a background without pre-multiplying the alpha channel or doing the transparency, like you get that effect, so it just doesn't look that good. So I might go closer to something front or side lit, and something like this. I don't know, just trying to show off or accentuate some of the form, parts of the form, some details or stuff like that. And sometimes it's useful just to knock lights forward or backward and see what happens. Like in intensity is what I mean with forward or backward. But yeah, to me, this is the main advantage of redshift, is just that you're able to try out so many ideas or combinations or options all very quickly. Whereas, I don't know, even with Mantra, like putting a light in, changing a color, and then seeing those boxes just like slowly resolve the noise. You're standing there for like a couple minutes before you can even really sort out what's going on or what you've done. So yeah, we'll do this, and maybe I'll just drag a copy of that light and jump into the copy, and then we can try out. I'm going to turn off these other cameras as well. It's a little distracting maybe to not know what camera you're lighting to or whatever. But yeah, maybe we'll see if we can get another thing. Sometimes if you're just setting in lights, if you just set it to like a really weird color, you can tell what's going on, even if you don't plan to use that color in the end. This is just another way to isolate or view that contribution of that light as you put it in. We'll go back to a more normal color. Yeah, these are kind of stuff is really fun to do. Particles, always fun. can't go wrong with them. And then redshift and GI bounces and that kind of stuff is always fun as well. So we have these 3 different lights now, just contributing, kind of have like a fill, I don't know, something close to like a key and a rim, but it's not super strict to set stuff up with like 3-point lighting like that or whatever, but just having a few different light sources is good at kind of showing the form much better. So something like that, and I'm actually going to go up here and try a little bit bigger particles, and then we'll put a shader on things. So that kind of stuff will play a big role in your lighting in terms of how deep the particles, the light scatters into the particles, and the shadowing and that kind of stuff. So it's pretty important to dial that in, as well as the starting to play around with the shaders. Set color from density, I mean creating an attribute that stores distance to the closest point. Yeah, so earlier on we were doing some stuff like that, but in the viewport that's kind of what I'm visualizing is color by density, or the spatial I just call it spatial density of the particles. Might want to try some stuff in the shader with it, but for right now I'm just doing it like that. So I just do this volume rasterized particles. This is like a gain, so if you just adjust it after they're rasterized, it's quicker to make adjustments instead of, if you do it up here, you have to keep rasterizing the particles every time you make a change. So that's the only reason I do it after like that. And then blurring to smooth everything. And then this just copies the density value as color to the particles, and you don't even have to change any settings or do anything. So it's super straightforward. No vex coding yet. So we'll do material. I usually like to work keeping most of the stuff here at this object level. That way, if you're churning out more shots, you could save like 1 file per camera view or stuff, and if you want to reuse lights, it's not the best way of working in terms of like procedurally, but just in terms of, I don't know, it's somewhat like non-destructive, but ideally you would want everything in one scene, but that can get a little bit messy or whatever, so I tend to work this way. Yeah, the volumes is a nice way to do it because you can smooth it. It's super fast. You can control everything. If you actually calculate that per particle, it's pretty slow, and you don't have as much ability to like fine tune the results and blur it and do stuff like that. You just need to do the RS material builder. So I might try some Solaris stuff with this, but I think in terms of GPU performance, it's still not as good as redshift. And then I was talking about this earlier, but this photographic controls, like not being able to do this stuff in Solaris, it just puts a big damper on your like creative workflow if you're not able to quickly go in and just make color moves and curves moves and stuff like that. Like this is already feeling like a completely different composition, doing those small things. And like if you're having to save out an image, import it into another application, or even using cops in Houdini, it's just more frustrating to work with. I mean, there's portions of things I would do in Solaris, and there's more work I need to spend just figuring it out. But for this kind of stuff, working on like more advertising things where even you could have a creative director sit down next to you and punch stuff in real time and move a camera around, like that's a super valuable capability to be able to do. I mean, it depends what you're doing, if you're giving it to another person or if you're just putting it online or posting it somewhere, like that just depends if you want to bake that curve in. I usually find that with ASUS, it tends to be a little flat, and I usually like to give it, this is kind of like getting you back to sRGB almost, if you do this S curve. Usually I have that, but it just depends. Sometimes you want a bowed out curve like that for just super dreamy soft looks or whatever, but I usually will bake it out, like bake the look into the images, unless you're working with a compositor or on a shot with more people, then you want to preserve the color capabilities. But if you're just trying to get work done as quickly as possible, move on to the next project, it makes sense to do that. So usually making these shaders, I haven't applied it yet, but even before applying it, I'll add some roughness to the reflection, just to get away from a mirror, completely sharp reflection. And then you can just drag and drop it onto the geometry in the viewport if you want to assign it. That just fills in this material box. If you want to do a relative path, you can replace a portion of the thing. I mean, it's not super important, but this way you can, if you wanted to grab everything here and like put it into a sub network and, I don't know, work that way, you could do that. And then if you just want to do like a sanity check, you could start to recolor this stuff, and it looks like I might need to reboot or just restart my redshift for the shader to get picked up. Sometimes if you do too much editing of like materials and reassignments and stuff like that, the viewer in redshift will get like out of sync, or it will not see that update. But once you have it in, then you should be able to continue on with the IPR and have it pull changes in right away. So yeah, even with some shaders like that, we're starting to get closer looks to some of this stuff. One thing you can do that's pretty nice is if you have bigger particles like this that have some overlap. I'm not sure how well it will work, but if you start to add in some opacity or decrease the overall opacity, this will start to have like a blurring effect almost, because you're overlapping particles, but they're not taking 100% of the visual light. So like as they overlap and stack up, they kind of blur together or smooth together a little bit. So super slow to do opacity if you're using Mantra or some other renderers, but Redshift handles it somewhat well. You can also change the components. So if you have some saturation, then you start to get this color attenuation. As the light scatters into the particles, it will start to affect its hue or the tint of the overall color. I don't know if all of these have it, but I feel like there's some differentiation in, it's very subtle, but like, I don't know, some of these are getting a little bit different colors. It could be colored lights. Sometimes it's hard to tell just looking at the image, but it can be cool to do stuff like this. So you can increase it and really get super extreme things. Basically, this one goes the opposite direction across the color wheel because it's like absorbing this color channel, this color more than others, because its opacity starts at 1 and then goes to 0 for transparent or whatever. So that's why it's giving me a green look, because the green channel here is the lowest value. So if we want to get back to something that's closer to red. Maybe we'll have to start at like the green channel or something like that. And then I'm going to go back into the base properties and we'll get back to the colors that we had originally we're looking at. You maybe do some emission. I don't know, it could be a little too wacky, but basically if you're working with particles like this is the similar ideas like doing an environment light, but you don't get any of the ambient occlusion or stuff like that. But if you really need some fill light or like maybe to separate how things look from the background, you might want to do some emission, but I think for right now it's going to look better without it. You could try maybe. I haven't seen, are the particles animated in the reference ad? I haven't seen too much of it. I just saw these images somewhere online. I know some of these phones, they will tie some motion to like an action, or they'll do some parallax with the wallpaper. Like some subtle motion or stuff like that, but we do have an ability to retime this. I did save the particle IDs. If we need to, we can try it. I did this simulation where the motion is like super, I didn't really intend it to be viewed in motion, just because it's so chaotic, but that lets you like get through the simulation to a good frame more quickly. But we can, it's not going to be super nice motion, but you can definitely get a little bit of animation happening in the particles. So I was even reducing this opacity even more, and that was starting to seem a little bit better to me. All of these references have a pretty dreamy look that's I don't know, nice to have that lightweight kind of powdery feel and everything to it. 40 I don't think it's malt, it's just the standard. I think this is like a Spanish brand or something like that. Usually I'm drinking the Super Bock, but they were all out of it at the store today. It depends what I'm working on, if I light and do that. Certain projects you can, some of them you can't. Just depends on the supervisor and stuff like that. I did this Samsung center stage. This Barbarian group handled the technical aspects of like turning it into an installation, but this was at Method Studios that I worked on it at the time, and it was just all kind of set up in Houdini, and then there was like a flame artist that was doing the final color correction and compositing and stuff like that. So we were able to do all these really interesting camera moves and retimes and crazy stuff with like instancing and doing all the stuff you can do in Houdini. So it's really cool to work that way when you can, but it's not always the way that the company or the team wants to work or stuff like that. Sometimes not everyone knows Houdini. And then it's a little bit slower to work that way because you need to cache and exchange data and do that kind of stuff, but it's a better use of resources in terms of like having everyone on the team being able to do their actual task. So it just depends on some projects I have, and they've been a lot of fun, and sometimes I've taken on too much and I wish I could pass off caches or whatever. Like, just depends a lot on the timeline and company and all that stuff. So that's feeling pretty good. I don't know if it's a little too red. could be nicer going more into the yellow orangish. Most of this stuff I'll usually leave it where it is. This overexposure stuff can be nice. It's kind of just like a slider that gives you tone mapping. So you can get like more contrast or just a more balanced light response, depending how much you want to play around with it. You can also do maybe some saturation, but too much of that will kind of just get a little, starts to look a little too fake, too crazy. So leave that where it is. Might increase the sharpness or reduce the roughness of this. I think some of these, it's hard to tell the resolution, but you almost see like a 1 pixel specular response. So it definitely feels like a sharper spec hit if we just look at this one thing, like a material shader ball or something like that. So I think that gives you a little bit more crunchiness or helps you pop some stuff out or whatever. I don't know, the only other thing I do sometimes is this bloom. Definitely don't want that much of it. It should be like, I don't know, at least to me, it should usually be pretty subtle if you're turning it on and off. Kind of always looks a little bit crazy if you're like really boosting it. You might get something like that, could be interesting, but again, this is just why I like to have all these controls, so I can change lights, change how the shadows are looking, all super quickly. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, having that background stuff boosted, it's visually it's pretty interesting, I think. I don't know what's happened here. This thing's a little odd how that's trailing some bits behind, but you can always crop stuff after the fact visually. Sometimes that's nice to be able to just crop the image or whatever. But generally I try to find the majority of the look and framing and stuff like that in 3D. So yeah, that's pretty good. I mean, I might just set this one aside as like the first look or the first kind of frame, or just call this one done for right now. So we'll just save this as a new version. If you have this cache, we're here at the start of the stream, and cache that out, you might be able to pull in this file and get the lights. And you have redshift. Maybe 1% of the people here actually meet all of those conditions, but otherwise, if you just want to take a look at the lighting setup or whatever, feel free to grab that. Sometimes the only other thing you might want to do is some depth of field, but I don't think I saw too much of it in these. They're all pretty sharp, so I'm going to ignore depth of field for now. Sometimes another thing I'll do is turn on this bucketed rendering mode with redshift, and then you're able to gauge just a little bit better like how long it's actually going to take to render. Usually I won't render it as I'm working. I think that's almost too distracting. Like you're starting and stopping the certain part of the creative process, so it like kind of messes you up, or just if you're vibing and getting good colors and then you just save that file and you render it later. I like to kind of keep on a train of thought or whatever with the creative process or whatever. So this Redshift is the render engine that I'm using. Maxon bought it, but it's a GPU-based render plugin. So it's one of the cheaper plugins. It's an extra like thing that you have to pay for. That's a different company besides side effects, but it lets you use your GPUs to render stuff, and does this color correction stuff. Like all of that is part of Redshift. This is the render viewer that you can use to dial stuff in. But yeah, I think that overall it's one of the faster GPUs. A lot of advertising, commercial studios and stuff like that use it just because you don't need a super big render farm. If I wanted to save this out as an animation, I could probably set it overnight, and at this resolution that's like 2K, or I don't know, somewhere close to 4K, but maybe like 3K. I could probably have like a 30 or 40 frame shot done, just like a 1 or 2 second shot done overnight. And if you want to work on small things and have it look good, I mean, to me, this is the only way I'm able to do it, with just a single machine, a single workstation, and a single render license. Like, there are render farms on the cloud, but having this quality at this speed with one computer is, and I'm just using one of the GPUs right now. That's to me is another big reason why I do it. Yeah, there are options for render farms, but as well, that's kind of like what I'm saying is being able to visualize and see the final result, set things. I mean, if there's a Redshift render farm, I'd do it, but I always get worried about wasting money sending stuff to render farms and stuff like that. Yeah, the biggest project that made me switch from Mantra to finding another one, let me see if I'm logged in. Vimeo is such a horrendous website to use at this point. But yeah, I was working on I wanted to do this RBD thing that was like a shattering wine glass, and trying to render that many glass shards with reflections and transparencies was definitely one thing in Mantra that just to move a light, it would take me 2 or 3 minutes just before I could even generally gauge like what was going on in the image. And then if you're trying to adjust, I was doing some displacement and stuff like that, bump mapping and procedural noises for edge detail, just trying to dial that in, like using Mantra, it was almost impossible just because there's so many reflections, and this is definitely what like a GPU ray tracer, the biggest advantages has over a CPU is that it's all kind of the same operation, that it's just repeating over and over again. So like it's going to be a lot better than trying to do that with a CPU. So yeah, I'll just pause that where it is, but you can see we're getting definitely even better look, but doing the progressive rendering, I kind of have enough information. I'm close enough to like what the final look is that I can just save the scene and set it aside and keep moving on. This would probably be something you would like submit for review, whether it's to the client or to in Art Director, or if you're just working independently, you could put it in forums, like a work in progress section, and make sure you save the file and stay organized. But you might want to go back and like move a light a little bit, but basically this is close enough. I'm figuring that it's like we can set it aside, and if there's little tweaks, I can open it up, render out this version, but if there are little adjustments, we can always do that as well. So yeah, this is the IPR preview thing, and you could see just how much better it was looking even with the actual like final bucketed renderer. So yeah, I saved this one, and I can just save again, just start with a new version, and can start to maybe try out another one of these views. I don't know, maybe something like this is an interesting silhouette. So I'll just set all this stuff to camera 2. Setting it here is important. I told you earlier how I was cropping this to the current camera. So we're basically removing the extra. I need to get rid of this. I don't know if there is a way to. Okay. So yeah, it's cropping based off of some padding or whatever, but it's just isolating particles for this specific camera. So if we go from 38 million or whatever to like 4 million, it's a lot quicker to work and render just the ones that you're going to actually see in the camera. Andre, thank you for the 16 months. Let's go. Bora. Vamos lá. Yeah, I mean, I don't know why it's not as automatic. I think they don't really know, like the renderer doesn't really know what you're planning to do with stuff. So if they've tried to do that kind of automatic stuff, you might get flickering shadows or stuff like that because they don't always know you have this kind of particle effect. You can't always do it if you have stuff with reflective surfaces. You need to like reflect that other stuff, but for this kind of stuff, it's a good trick to be able to do. Like side effects could add a node, and maybe there's like a labs node for it, but it's just a couple of nodes. I don't mind just setting it up that way. So we're in camera 2. Can open up this render view. Tudo bem? Muito bem. And I just need to change it there. Ora bem. So yeah, our lights here aren't obviously dialed in or whatever, so I'm gonna turn off some other ones, and we'll just get back down to the environment, just the dome light. And we could try maybe something in the green territory here. And we also need to keep in mind that we're doing that coloring in the shader and with the opacity. So if we want to attenuate to green, we need to move that slider over a little bit. If we want these particles maybe not to be as opaque, or not to be as transparent, we can make them more opaque. Let's get one of these lights, turn it on, get over to the green. The RTX 3080 and the Quadro, any difference? The RTX is definitely faster for rendering. The Quadro, it has like a ton of GPU memory or whatever. It has like 48 gigs of GPU RAM. So for doing Pyro simulations and OpenCL stuff, you can do really high resolution domains almost in real time, the simulation. But for just rendering, like the gaming card is better in that situation. Sometimes it's nice to get these lights kind of in close. I might have to turn this one down, but you can bring people's eye, like the direction of people's eye, and accentuate just locally more areas or stuff like that a little bit better. So if we just turn off the dome, we just look at the contribution of this light. You can kind of see what's going on there. You can also turn the spread down. That has the side effect of like increasing the intensity overall, but sometimes that can be even better to like direct stuff. Yeah, I saw the 3090, all those, the crypto kitties are dumping their cards, so it's a good time to buy. Yeah, they might have a new, even more powerful one coming out. But it's nice that the GPUs are not crazy expensive. I mean, there's still like the chip shortage or maybe some other supply line issues, but overall, better to have cheap GPUs. Yeah, I got the 3080 like a couple years ago, I think, so it was still a pretty big price differentiation, and already you can only use one GPU for the OpenCL stuff in Houdini. So I already had one that had a ton of VRAM. I didn't really need to worry too much. Like, I don't know. It helps a little bit with Redshift to have the GPU memory, but it's not a deal breaker like it is with OpenCL. Like your sim will just fail. You don't have like out of core simulation. You just run out of space and it crashes. Yeah, that is another thing when you can actually really buy it without the botted scalper. All right, so I'm gonna put in this other light. It's almost interesting there with the other color, but I don't know. I'm gonna keep this the way it is for right now, and get closer to like something green, maybe a little bit into the cyan or blue. It's kind of interesting. And I feel like most of these is going to be more successful to do this kind of side lighting thing. Yeah, I mean, I just have this pure ref open. These are the general ones here. I forget the search parameters or whatever for it. It might have been this S22. I think so. I don't know if I've ever seen it in motion. I was just grabbing some stills that I saw that was like similar to that. So I don't know if they've even shown any or ever had it in motion. But overall, I think Samsung or just these Android phones have had some interesting particle effects. I think previously they did some stuff like this, and then they did some. This is, to me, was always really cool. These like stacked contrasting colors, all that stuff. I've played around with the stable diffusion stuff just on the toggle of the Pyro solver, but I haven't sat down and really done a ton of testing and everything like that with it. But yeah, these very thin stuff to me was really cool. But yeah, I think this Galaxy, every year they have pretty cool, very almost like paint colors and color mixing and all that stuff. It's pretty cool. So this is maybe too bright right now. It's just maybe too different of a color. Let's try something like that, and then I'm just going to put in the dome light again. That usually makes a pretty big difference in terms of visually like seeing everything together. Five Gens U10. Thank you for the tier 1. Meant the neural net that's that's stable. I thought you were talking about a setting on the Pyro. They have some new thing on the Pyro, the sparse solver, that's like a diffusion reflection or something like that. I haven't played around too much with any of the neural or the AI stuff. A while back I was working at a company that we were generating learning information for that stuff with computer generated renders and that kind of things, and was working with some engineers and stuff like that that were programming some of those models. That was interesting to see, but kind of had a little bit of my fill of that kind of work. It was just too much like tech coding, programming based, and not visual enough for me. Phil Gorn, thank you for the Philly Gorn. Thank you for the Amazon Prime, Twitch Prime, Prime Gaming. So this is some nice interaction here. It's like getting some bounce light, the main light. I think that's feeling pretty nice. I'm gonna save this, and then sometimes what I'm gonna do, if I want to keep working with the same camera but I don't want to have the cropping keep like recalculating, if you drag a copy of it and you jump into that camera, then you can even do maybe a little bit more like examination. You can do some subtle moves and see what happens. I mean, it's super sloppy and like not ideal to keep making cameras and moving them everywhere and stuff like that, but just for speed and interactivity and stuff like that, it's kind of a trick. So you're not having to update the particles on the GPU like every time you move stuff around. Yeah, I mean, I have a little bit of a software background, but I mean, there was days where like I didn't do too much Houdini even. It was like a lot of Python scripting, and even inside of Houdini, sometimes you'll just spend time developing tools or things and not even have the viewport open or whatever. So that, I mean, to me, I don't mind that kind of stuff. I think it's fun to get into the technical tool building things, but just doing only those tasks or whatever for too long, it just gets a little too boring or too mundane for me. Working on Linux while you were in Linux and not Windows. Yeah, I mean, a lot of bigger CG studios will use Linux. It's more efficient than Windows. Like if you search online, Linux versus Windows, people have done breakdowns or tests, and the Linux is more efficient with memory. So if you don't have a ton of money to spend on like resources for your computer, it's just getting more bang for your buck. You also don't have to worry about paying Microsoft money, and I don't know, Microsoft is maybe going to do a subscription model in the future, and like one less subscription service that you have to keep paying every month or every year is definitely a better thing for CG artists. But yeah, I mean, the main reason I learned it was like when I was working at DreamWorks. They were using Linux there, and then even in university, like my teachers and stuff recommended, if you're interested in getting into Houdini and working at like Sony or DreamWorks or any of those places, they said it would be useful. So I listened to them and did it. Yeah, with the flip solver, I think it works a lot better. It might be the different memory allocators or that kind of stuff, but it's not the most fun operating system to use just for like everyday use. But in terms of using Houdini, I prefer to use it on Linux for sure. So I think this composition is starting to be more interesting. We can always rotate these afterwards, do a little flop or something like that. But yeah, I think this is a little bit more dynamic. There's more motion or whatever to it than the previous frame. So we want to just update that now that we have our final one. We can be sure we're getting all of the particles and cropping them properly or whatever. And should be good. I might go a little bit wider here with this focal length, just so I'm not cropping too much of the top of that splash out. So maybe we'll just go to 37. CG Rockstar, thank you for the tier 1. Good to see you in here again. And Broken Robot Art, thank you for the prime. So that's feeling a little bit better. I mean, just in terms of like composition, sometimes you don't want to crop little bits off. It's like a little distracting for your eye to look at, but also in terms of being able to crop in on things, sometimes it's a little bit better to leave yourself more room than take it away or whatever. You can always subtract, but you can't add stuff. Yes, it's been a long time indeed. I mostly vanished from Twitch for some time. Just getting busy with work, and then I was also moving. But yeah, we have a regular schedule somewhat again. It's just been a week, pretty much a week back so far. But yeah, it's good to be back. Good to see you in here again as well. So maybe do some colors in the diffuse. I might have gotten a little too crazy with the saturation here. Like the more that you let the light through with such a high saturation, the more that it will like oversaturate or whatever as it pops through. That's can just get a little too fake, too cartoony, I think, if you do too much of that. But something like this is maybe a little bit more refined. Yeah, it's tough with CG work and all that stuff to really like. Sometimes you just have to take on work, and then sometimes that work becomes too busy that it absorbs your life. But when you can find a balance, it's nice, but it's not always 100% in your control. So this one's pretty good. Bing, bing, bing. Just do that. I'm just gonna save this again to lock in that version. And if you guys want to take see streaming while working, some projects that aren't as secretive, you might be able to stream them. I think, especially if it's for a smaller client or like a friend, or something, you can ask them if you're happy with them streaming it. But I've never been in that situation, unfortunately. So we'll move up to another version here, version 5. The only clients, that's like a paid, instead of OnlyFans, only clients. It's the extra little Instagram thing that you post. So I might go up here, and this is probably going to be the last composition, so just bang out 3 different kind of looks or styles here today. But yeah, I'm just going to try out some different time samples, maybe something like this earlier on. Let's try this frame 28. Put that through. We want to go into camera 3 now for our cropping. But I'm just going to finesse the view a little bit more. I feel like these thicker shapes, before they got too chaotic, some of them are a little bit closer to some of these smoother ones. Just sometimes visiting the stream. Thanks for stopping in, Splatterteague. So we'll just frame that up pretty nice. Yeah, and then again, I'm doing this cropping, so we're going from like 28 million particles down to 9 million. So just rendering them, it makes the like spin up or time to first pixel a lot quicker, and just a ton of tricks over time from doing this hundreds of times, hundreds of thousands of times. Eventually you find some nice hacks. I'm using the speed hacks today. So I'm gonna go in here, and maybe it's a little bit better. First, you just zero out your, oh my God, CG Rockstar. Thank you for the gift subs. Thank you for gifting 5 tier 1 subs to the channel. I appreciate it. Helping me grow the channel. So yeah, I'm just gonna zero out this shader, and anyone who's getting a sub today, if you do !Discord, you can click here and join the Discord. And if you synchronize your Twitch to the Discord, you will get access to this bonus feed, bonus channel. So there's full tutorials, scene files and stuff like that, going through other animations and showing stuff in more detail. So yeah, you can even continue the learning process in there as well. So this bot, I think, has a cooldown period, but it will, maybe in 1 or 5 minutes, you can bang the bot again for another. Anyone can use this invite. It's not specific to me. You can just click on that link. If you go to my website as well here, it's a little bit buried, but there's like this wiki that if you click on, there's a ton of other resources that you can get to, just useful resources. So with Houdini at the bottom there, I have a permanent link. If you're not using Twitch or whatever, you can do that. You can also go to johnkoons.com/live. And if you don't like using the Twitch website, you can see me live right here as well. And it's a cool way. I don't know, the Twitch website can be slow or whatever as well. So you can do some stuff there. So I'm just zeroing out these lights for right now. We could turn the other ones off for a second. And maybe the yellow. So we've kind of done a reddish one, a lime greenish one or something like that. So if you're going to show all 3 of these together, maybe you want to pick some colors that look nice together. Just working more efficiently or whatever. So I think these 3 will work better. So we'll maybe go more into the purple. More into the purple zone. Beer money. The beers in Portugal are a little, so I moved to Portugal, and yeah, the beers are a little bit cheaper. So I'm going to pull in the next light. Yes, I am in the Western European time now. We're a little bit closer in sync. You're still in Indian time? Yeah, I was in West Coast Pacific time. I think it was usually like 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. for you then. But we should be a little bit more synced up, but it's pretty late for both of us now. Let's get into this light number 1. Maybe deactivate that for a second. I'm gonna shuffle these cameras so you can actually see what we're lighting to. I don't know. Hugo doesn't ring a bell. That retime was done post simulation for the bursting bubble that you can see on the website. Yeah, I think with a lot of solvers, I mean, it's more time efficient to work with a retime built in, but a lot of time, like you're doing less simulating because you're not simulating excessive frames, but a lot of areas of the solver or micro solvers aren't tied to a changing scale, so sometimes you'll get weird effects that way or whatever. So especially with flip solver where you have the particle ID and you can just retime for free, It's nice to be able to do it at post sim. But yeah, working with camera composition and then retiming, like it's a lot easier to do it that way than starting to build your retime curve. Doing it's kind of I don't know. I've tried to work that way and it's not well suited to the process. Yeah, feel free to send me his details. I feel like there's a good, I don't know if any of them are in here tonight. We've had some Portuguese representation in the chat, Brazilian representation in the chat. The slowdown not in post, I would do it in 3D in Houdini, but I would do it post simulation, so after the simulation. So you're simulating at a really high frame rate, and then you just have more frames that you can retime after. There's a pyro like retiming stream I did a while back where I talk about kind of more advanced aspects of that kind of stuff. The technical aspects that you might need to worry about. But sometimes retiming in posts, you get some choppiness or that kind of stuff. So maybe we'll try some non-monochromatic, some two-tone for this one. I don't know, I'm always getting too bored sometimes just perfectly matching or like just trying to work too close to what references have. So sometimes it's nice to change things up and throw in a curveball or something like that. But sometimes you get yourself into a mess straying too far from reference or whatever. Yeah, I remember you from Discord. Motion blur. I think doing it in render, especially with redshift, is pretty fast. Is good. These ones I wasn't seeing a ton of. There's definitely some blurring or like fancy stuff happening in some of these, but overall, I saw them to be pretty crisp. But I usually will try to do it in the render if I can, especially with doing like RBD simulations and things spinning and stuff like that. Being able to do multi-segment rotational motion blur in render is super nice. Mr. Rockstar, have a good night. Good to see you in here again. So we can start to color. I just reset it. I don't know. It's nice to start with a neutral color. And then you, I don't know, just set the color at first with your lights and then you can build from there. Ooh. It's a little too saturated, I think. This one, having the particles start earlier on, they're definitely clumping up much more, so we might want to actually decrease the P scale in this situation. But I'm gonna keep going with these saturation settings for a little bit. So yeah, because this is an earlier frame in the simulation, they're a lot more clumped together. So we'll try reducing the P scale or the density for this one. So that should kind of lift the shadows up, or allow more light to scatter into the simulation, or through the simulation. I think some of that stuff just started feeling a little too heavy. I'm going to go back to putting more of the color just into the diffuse channel. A Slurpee? I don't know. I haven't seen any of them. I feel like the closest thing I go to the Slurpee is like the gelato. They're close enough to Italy. You can get that ice cream gelato, put the espresso in it, mix them together. But yeah, this could be a pretty interesting concept for a smoothie commercial. Some kind of different fruit roll-up, liquidated fruit roll-up. So yeah, this kind of lighter pink feeling, pretty nice, especially around the top of it. I think some of this stuff, seeing it lit now, is a little boring. So I'm going to do another camera swap. And then I'm going to try to move the camera up over the top of everything so we have a little bit more stuff happening in the frame. So like just more dynamic. Some of those bigger folds or whatever in the bottom was just looking a little too boring or whatever. Maybe we can even get you want to eat your renders? Sometimes I was working on a candy commercial a while back that was like Hershey's or something that's it's kind of tormenting to just be staring at candy all day. So yeah, just because this is so fast to update and look at, it's pretty cool. Just even if you're exploring or whatever, just to check out some different camera angles. But I think this is pretty good. I think too much like over the top is a little bit too busy or distracting to look at. Something like this is feeling a little bit better. This highlighter being so hot over here is a little unbalanced. So I'm going to try to I'm going to try to kind of solo or identify which light is contributing. That looks like 2. You can always drag and drop these lights into the viewport as well to switch into them. And then I can maybe move it over, or maybe we want to do the spread kind of spotlight thing in this situation to direct it more into the other half of the stuff. And you can always completely solo it out. If you really want to dial it in. So this way we're just focusing it on screen left. Surfed in the Atlantic? I haven't. It's on my list of things to do, is maybe a surfing class or something like that. But yeah, I think Nazar or Nazari is Nazir? Somewhere north of me on the Atlantic coast is supposed to be the best surfing waves. Nazar. So yeah, that is a little bit nicer, I think, with the image. Might not be saying it right. I'm struggling with the Portuguese pronunciation of so many things. Yeah, definitely during one of these heat waves, I just need to get out of Lisbon and get to a windier area, get in the water. It would be more refreshing. There's so much brick and pavement and stones in downtown Lisbon that it just heats up, bakes so hot during those heat waves. Got some little Dippin' dots, but yeah, again, this is really nice gradients to get in here with like the bounce light, kind of indirect illumination. All that stuff happening is pretty nice. Just trying to get the foreground down here to not be as wild. AC is common here. It's not super common. Yeah, I mean, even when I was in, this is a lot better here with this light. Just backfilling stuff a little bit more. When I was in San Francisco, AC there wasn't common at all, and like there was definitely a few heat waves you'd get throughout the summer that you just had to kind of power through. But yet I don't have AC in my place, and some stores and shops and offices have it, but I think, I don't know, you don't really need it. It would come in handy, but it's not, you don't need it all year round. It did, yeah, touched 40, got a little higher than 40. You definitely just have to sweat it out, but it's tough. All right, so I might just do a few more tweaks here. All flavors at once. That's, I don't know why my post effects aren't loading. Maybe they didn't get propagated to these other cameras I've been putting in. But yeah, definitely mixing and matching flavors. Gotta do it. Some of the more advanced machines with the touchscreen, you can really get you can get quite adventurous with the options there. So yeah, I think this is getting close to being wrapped up. This one light here is just a little too powerful. I'm gonna switch some over to this side one. I feel like the warmer lights are working a lot better with the pink. Just making things feel more appetizing. So yeah, I think from here maybe just getting a background gradient that's a little bit just working a little bit better. I was just gonna mess around with these curves. Ooh. That just brought it up from 2K to 4K. It's like there's some filters on Instagram that's like structure or sharp or something that's just you crunch it and it's like I feel like you definitely need to be a little careful with that stuff, but definitely really like what's these layering of these colors here. It's super nice. Very luscious. That looks awesome. Thank you. Yeah, we might just want to do a little bit of the bloom. I think that helps kind of blend the background in a little bit. This one's it's very cotton candy. It's Ghostbuster 2. This is the psychedelic Slimers. Yeah, it was just feeling a little too bright. I think if you hold down Alt, Control, you can get the pixel values. So I don't really like too much stuff blown out, especially looking at these references. Like none of them are super blown out, but it's definitely good contrasted stuff to give you some dynamic range. So yeah, we'll put that one there. And this one should be the last one. So I'll just save it. Maybe I'll save it just as another version, just in case. And yeah, if you want to check that out, you can take a look on your end. It's going to be a little too time consuming. Need to get some more GPUs if I want to render all this stuff on stream. You're just gonna get the full candy shop set up with the putting the nerds, the runts, all the hard candies in the Slurpee. I did that one time when I was growing up. They had this drink called Surge. It was like a first iteration of an energy drink, but it was like sold as a soda. It was like an amped up version of a Mountain Dew. But yeah, we put nerds candy in the Slurpee so it would like dissolve as you drank it. It's just a complete overload of sugar. So yeah, I'll just set this one up here to do a proper render, the bucketed render. But yeah, other than that, I think we're getting close to wrapping up for today. For the weekend, I don't think I'm going to be able, I might be around on Sunday, but I might not be able to make that stream. But look at this. If we go in like that, and we go in like we did. I mean, this is a good way to actually make sure you're getting the similar specular response, but we're did get somewhat close to these. It's definitely super subtle, but it's definitely adds a good amount to the overall look. And yeah, hopefully you can see just the final amount of detail we're going to be able to get with this proper high resolution rendering and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool. Buddy had an obnoxious surge alarm clock that yelled surge at you. It's just a traumatic experience. But yeah, I really love with redshift. I might even turn it up a little bit. You can really play around with how much light you're bouncing around. So if we go to the global illumination, by default this is set to 4. If you're just doing stills like this and you have time to spare, you can definitely kick this up a ton. These are like diffuse bounces or GI bounces depending on what render you're using. And it does this GI cache for the secondary rays. And you can get even more, it's like subtle, you get even more bouncing and like lightweight feeling of everything. So yeah, with this irradiant cache finishes, I might put even more of this on here and you get just very photographic, this bouncing of light from one thing and like bleeding to another is definitely a really nice thing you can get with the GPU renders, because like typically it's just too expensive or too slow to render that, and people were always doing tricks, or like earlier 1990s and early 2000 renders was always like more flat, just sharp. You didn't have this interaction, but this ability for the light to penetrate and then bounce around, especially with the opacity turned down, we have some transparency that even boosts it even more. It's pretty nice. And yeah, you can always do 4K, 8K renders of this stuff, and like for advertising campaign ads and stuff, they per print they usually like to have high resolution, and these phones here, some of them might have like I don't know, the super dense pixel arrays or like high pixel density, like 4K, or sometimes they're even 8K displays. So being able to get all that detail without super ridiculous render times is pretty nice. So this one might take 1 or 2 hours. I'm working at like 2 or 3K almost, and going pretty crazy with the settings. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I think I'm gonna wrap things up where we are here. But yeah, join the Discord. Feel free to pop in there, share your results. We have a channel for a thing for sharing work in progress, questions, stream suggestions, hanging out on the Discord. All right. Yes, I'll let these render and maybe post them sometime over the weekend. Keep everyone in the loop on Sunday, whether I'll be streaming or not. I might be busy then, but if not, I'll be around. If not, stick to the schedule. All right. Take it easy, guys. Thanks for hanging out.